Okay, good morning, everyone. We're going to start the conference off today with Cindy Jennings from USC Upstate. And she's going to talk to you about engaging online learners and the pedagogy of presence. Take it away, Cindy.
All righty. Good morning, everyone, and thanks for being here. It's my honor to have an opportunity to share with you in your week. Awesome things going on there. It was my pleasure to meet Veronica in September when she came to visit us here and spent some time with us. And so having this opportunity to say some things to you about our or my experience mostly with teaching online is really a privilege. And so welcome to the session. I hope that you'll take away at least a heightened awareness of how important your participation in your online course is. That in fact, you are the most important tool for teaching online, not Blackboard, not Adobe Connect, not any other tools that you might have been considering this week. So I want to dispel that myth. And the most important thing that you need to take to your course is you. So we're going to be talking about some ways to frame presence and what presence means. And then at the very end, we're going to drill down to some specific ways that you can be present. And I'm going to share with you, I polled my class of students I'm teaching right now and asked them to send you greetings and feedback. And I want to share with you some of what they had to say about their experience. They are all students in an exclusively all online program that we offer here at USC Upstate. And so their opinions are very much informed by their very, very recent experiences as students. So when you think about your experience as an online teacher and or learner, some of you may have actually been in online environments as learners recently, and maybe you are new to the idea of teaching online, and maybe the whole idea of faculty or instructor or teacher presence in the course is something that you haven't given a whole lot of thought to, because we do tend to focus more on the technology of the teaching online. And maybe the experience is a little bit like this, that if no one is present, please use the honor box. So there's a little bit of a clue about what's going on, but maybe you're not entirely certain if you see this picture for the first time what to do next. So let's talk a little bit about that. The first thing I want to share and to ask us to think together about is why. Why is it important to think about instructor presence in a course? Why is that an important facet of the design of an online course to think about? And why design for deliberate presence of the instructor? I do want to say that this is not going to be a huge presentation of research findings, but I want to share a very condensed set of things that we have learned from students and learners about how important it is to learners to be able to feel the presence of their faculty in their course. So I'm going to share with you and present to you just a few themes of that evidence. So instructor presence, a strongly felt instructor in a course, helps to build a learning community. And I didn't share, there's a handout for you up above the list of participants that Veronica can help you pull down, and those of you who are in the room. And if you're here virtually, you can pull the handout down, and links to resources that are in the presentation are available in that handout. And a link to the presentation itself is there in the chat. I didn't link out to this work, but one of the thought leaders in this area is Randy Garrison and a group at the University of Athabasca in Canada. They have a whole program of research called A Community of Inquiry. And so having an instructor present who is engaged and in dialogue and present with and co-learning with students in their course certainly helps to build a community of learners. Having the instructor being present and having that presence felt helps online learners feel less isolated. If you've been in an online course, maybe some of you have been in MOOCs, or maybe you've had an experience where you have a question in an online situation and you can't get that answered. And that's often a complaint of students in online courses, is they feel isolated. They feel isolated from their faculty, their instructor. They feel isolated from their peers in the course. And so helping online learners feel less isolated through being present in your course is an important element. It is absolutely vital to the success of a course for the instructor to be present. Social presence in your course, and maybe that's something that is very new and different to think about, how to be socially present in your course, helps to increase interactions between the learner and the faculty, and interactions between students. It helps to increase student satisfaction, and it helps to increase the depth of learning. Again, these are all themes of evidence and research findings about the importance of faculty presence in an online course. And so we'll assume those as givens as we continue to talk about some of the elements of presence and how we can think about them. And so from the slides, you can visit the Community of Inquiry site and all of the rich resources that are available there to look at their proposed elements of presence. One being cognitive, and certainly we want our learners to be present, cognitively present. This being, according to Garrison and his colleagues, the extent to which participants can construct meaning. So this is how learners engage. This is how learners are encouraged to consider the ideas in your course. And so what does your presence have to do with that? Social presence, the ability of learners to project their personal characteristics. So how do we invite learners to be present? How do we invite them to express their individual selves and needs and their learning preferences into a course? And then teaching presence. And that's when we deliberately, this is presence of the teacher, not teaching students how to be present. The design and the facilitation and direction of cognitive and social presence. So this is how we get to the meaningful learning that we desire. Some constructs or ingredients that make up presence. So we've talked about types of presence and beginning to think about maybe more broadly than the whole idea of making your presence known in your course. And with this one, I'd like to begin to think about some ways this translates into actual design of your course. These are 4 broad constructs, 4 broad elements, 4 broad components of presence. Timeliness being one, feedback another, relevancy, and immediacy. And under those, under timeliness, setting expectations for that. So it's important for students to know your availability. When will you be available? And for you to be available at those times. How will you be available? So I should probably issue a disclaimer that a whole lot of what I'm going to be sharing in terms of specific suggestions have to do with my own experience in teaching online and things that are informed by my teaching a course over and over and feedback from students and how things that have worked and things that have been not so successful. But it's my preference, and this is not for everyone, I'll admit that. I set expectations for my students with regard to my availability in the beginning of the course by telling them that I'm pretty much available all the time because I have devices that allow me to be connected to them all the time. And I know there are probably some horrified looks in the room, or people are rolling their eyes saying, oh my gosh, the 24/7 availability is just too much for me. And I will say that I've only had probably 2 over the years that I've been teaching students who went a little bit beyond what I would prefer in terms of taking advantage of that availability. So I invite them to connect with me on Twitter. I share my Twitter handle. I invite them to connect on Google. None of these are required. Certainly I use my university email account. A couple of them use the chat that's available through our student email system. And the sort of rule and umbrella for all of that is that I tell them that if they message me using any of these methods and they don't get a response within 24 hours, then they should message again and assume that I didn't see the message or that I need a reminder. Again, that's not for everyone, but the whole set expectations under the idea and construct of timeliness, it's important for students to know from the get-go where they can reach you, how they can reach you, and by when they could expect a reply. It's not for everyone to extend themselves 24/7. I totally understand that. For many students, though, I get that it is the appearance of availability that they find comforting, not necessarily that I'm going to contact you at 2 a.m. when I'm doing my work, but that I could if I really needed to, and my message would be waiting for you when you are up in the morning. And because I kind of work in a world of constant connectedness, it's not something that is unusual for me. It's not for everyone. Under timeliness, meeting them where they are and creating intentional opportunities for interactions. There are many ways to accomplish this, many ways to invite students into your course for the first time, many ways to invite students to get to know each other and introduce themselves. I, for a long time, used a wiki in Blackboard where we did this whole everyone in the course introduced themselves and put up an image and did a bio, and I would unfold that over the course of the semester. So the first thing that I would ask them to do is just say a little bit of biographical information. Then the following week I'd say things like share 3 things about yourself that no one would ever guess. And then another time I asked them what kind of music they like to listen to when they work. That one was kind of funny because I got responses from students that said, I don't listen to music when I work. I don't know why you're asking me that. So I had to be a little bit careful about how I had those bios unfold over time. Now I'm teaching a compressed session in the Palmetto College program here at Upstate, and I don't have that luxury of those unfolding biographies, but they are an option if you're teaching a longer session, and it's a thing that you can help students to connect with one another, and you can begin to share some things and do that. For everything that I asked them to share, I shared something about myself. Pictures of pets, trip they've been on, something that is more personal and a different way to connect outside the confines of the course requirements and all of that stuff. Now I have my students divided into small groups and they introduce themselves to each other in their small groups, and then away we go. No time for that unfolding stuff. Feedback is probably, besides the general idea of being present and responding in a timely manner, one of the most important elements and takeaways from what I would like to share with you. And giving that feedback in a timely manner, and those two things go together really closely. Being specific in that feedback. For those of you who are Blackboard users, and I'm assuming that many of you are if you're at USC Aiken or institutions in the USC system, the Blackboard Grade Center offers a very rich editor now for you to be able to provide a variety of feedback, including the video everywhere feature that's in there, so that if you didn't want to provide the typical text, then you could even record responses to students either using your webcam or audio or both. And in the beginning, I'll admit this can be really time consuming. But being specific as opposed to just giving a grade helps students understand and iterate towards the expectations that you have for them, and they will rise to the occasion if they feel that you are actually engaging with their work and doing that in a meaningful manner. One of the things that I like to do when I'm giving feedback, especially in the very beginning, is to provide a lot of quotes from their work. So I don't give tests in my course. It happens to be a a course where I don't need to, and my information doesn't lend itself very well to objective testing. And so there are no tests, and students write. They write the evidence of their learning, and often I will provide quotes as evidence of things that are important in terms of what I'm expecting. The inline grading feature in Blackboard also offers a very rich medium for you to be able to highlight and mark up assignments that students submit so that you can give them very specific feedback. Summarizing discussions, I've seen a fair amount of literature that is in opposition to one another on whether or not it's a good idea for faculty to participate in discussions with students, because some are of the opinion that faculty in the discussion stifles the peer-to-peer exchange. I believe it's important for students to understand and to realize, and for you to leave traces that you've actually paid attention to what you've written, you've asked them to write or asked them to discuss. So that could be in the form of a summary. It could be you actually participating in the discussions. It has a lot to, it depends a lot on how you set the discussions up, and whether you have a discussion of the whole, all the students in your class are participating. I have students in small groups, so it's a little bit much for me to say that I'm going to dialogue with every small group. But I do occasionally provide summaries. Like this past weekend, students submitted a learning reflection for me, and all of those were turned in privately to me. They weren't a dialogue. But I pulled all that text down. I ran it through a tool called Voyant, and created a word cloud. There are a lot of different ways that we could have analyzed that text collectively if we had a little more time than 7 weeks. But the texts of their learning reflections and what they actually say they have been getting from the course was important. And it was important for them to see, oh, look, that's what all of us think was important looking at the word cloud. This is a typical word cloud where the words that appeared the most frequently were the largest in the cloud. And first of all, it let them know that I paid very close attention to what they wrote, and it also let them think about this assignment in a completely different way. Although it was a private submission to me, not a discussion, it was a different way for them to examine that work and to see that I was present and to give them feedback in a different nature, a kind of collective aggregate feedback. When you correspond with students and you give that feedback, each and every time I start feedback, I use the student's name. Seems like a small thing, but I say, Cindy, a very insightful and thoughtful post this week. Here's a quote I especially liked, etc., etc. Is that time consuming? Yes, it is. Is it important to those students? You bet it is. Again, it does all of those things that we looked at in the beginning, and it helps them to know that I'm paying very close attention to their work. On the relevancy area and the side of relevancy, a caution here about course copying, which I'm as guilty of as anyone else, because I do teach the same course over and over, and that course copy feature in Blackboard makes it really easy to do that. But making sure that the information that you share is new and current. There's nothing more kind of affirming to a student that you aren't really paying attention than if you have last year's tutorials or last year's videos or last year's recordings. And I know you're thinking, well, you know, if I go through all that recording of all those things that I'm sharing in there, I'm sure not going to do them over and over again every semester. I get that. So it's important when you're thinking about creating content for sharing in your course that you make it timeless and you don't attach any kind of dates or identifiable things to it so that students can't tell that it's a thing that you're reusing over and over again, that you take care in the design that links aren't broken and that information is fresh and current. On the immediacy, it's a good idea for you to respond to their bios, to meet and greet them in the same space that you've invited them to connect in, and to relate to those personal stories that they may have shared. So let's get down to some more specifics. I've alluded to a few that I use. What are some things that work? Some strategies that you might bring into your course? I'll share a caution that I share with faculty here all the time. It probably wouldn't be a good idea for you to go away from this presentation this morning and to think, I'm going to try to do every single one of those things that she talked about in my course next semester or even before the semester's over. Not a good idea. I would pick the thing that fits your style, that makes the most sense for you, that you feel like you can sustain and maintain and troubleshoot, and that you can make work over time. And if you want to add more later, fine, do that. But pick the lowest threshold item for you and for your students so that all of you aren't frustrated by having too many things turned on at once. So how can I be present in my online course? The first thing that I would suggest, and this one seems so self-evident sometimes it seems like it wouldn't be necessary to say, but I had an opportunity last year. I was invited by a colleague here to review her online course for her promotion and tenure dossier. And her course was very well designed, except that when I clicked into it for the first time, I had no idea what to do first because there was nothing there to tell me that as an online learner. So where to start? What's the first thing I should do? And in conversing with her, it's like, well, they should look at the syllabus. They should know that. Okay, but if you're an online learner and I'm never seeing, and I'm going to never see you in my classroom, sure, we usually start in a face-to-face class with a review of the syllabus in our classroom course, but that's not something that we would assume that an online learner would know. Oh, I should go directly to the syllabus as the first thing that I do. So reach out early before the course begins in whatever fashion suits you and fits your style. So is that in the form of an email? Is that an announcement? Very often I have students who contact me before the course starts and want some details. For us in the USC system, you want to be careful that you verify that your emails are accurate. I'll bet that you at USC can have the same challenges that we have at USC Upstate so that students get that automatically default assigned email account that's actually from Columbia, the Columbia system account, and that those have to be updated. So making sure that if you do email those first instructions that all of your students are going to receive them, but they should know something before the course begins. Another thing that is sometimes a challenge, occasionally we have situations where faculty take their course offline or they make it so that it is unavailable to students because they're still working in it and they don't want students to see yet. And we've had situations where, especially for very distant students who are online learners who are not here on campus, who panic when they look in Blackboard and their course is not there. So I would advise, if you're going to keep things hidden to continue to work and design and construct and build before students are invited in, that you not make the entire course unavailable, that you select those items that they don't need to see first. A personable course welcome in whatever form that might be. The video everywhere, I'll mention again for those Blackboard folks in the session, is just a really fantastic tool. Now you can create an announcement with a video embedded directly in your Blackboard course. You do have to create a YouTube account, so you have to have a Google ID, you have to have a Google account and a YouTube channel before that works for you. But it is a really nice tool for students to be able to click in and see you and hear you for the first time when the course is about to begin. I've mentioned calling students by name before. Help your students connect with one another. One thing that I set up in my course every semester is a discussion forum called Give Help, Get Help. I've seen some other faculty do lately a thing called Ask 3, Then Me. So they create peer support mechanisms, that community of inquiry, that community of learners, they create places where students can connect with and help one another. And the Ask Three Then Me is a really awesome thing that they begin to help themselves before they have that panic stricken moment that they email you to say, I can't get to this or this won't work for me. The give help, get help is just another way to phrase that. And I keep that discussion forum set so that I can subscribe to it. I'll get an email every time someone posts there so that if something needs my attention, then I can get into that forum and provide a response that perhaps all of the students and the class can benefit from. Live interactions, I think you had a really excellent session earlier in the week about Adobe Connect, and this is a tool that I use constantly in my course. And I invite students into a 1-hour session where I call it an office hour, and I invite students in to meet with me live and ask questions. The tricky part for me with the population of students that I teach in the program I teach in, they are all working adults, and often only a handful of students in the entire class can be present. But I record the session just as this session is being recorded and make that recording available. So I do that at the beginning of every week. My modules are set up in a weekly format. So in the beginning of the week, we get an overview of the module, and they're also working on a digital project that is an iterative, incremental thing that they do step by step during the entire 7 weeks. So we spend a little time on the project, we get the overview of the module, and then I entertain questions from the group. And usually those 2 or 3 in the session live will represent their colleagues very well. Occasionally I'll get a question from a student in advance who will say, would you demonstrate this thing or that thing and show us how that works during the office hour, and I'll listen later. So those live interactions can be really helpful. Let me jump back up to the first impressions thing. Another thing that I do every semester, and this is another, doesn't suit everyone. Everyone probably wouldn't want to go to this much, wouldn't want to schedule this much, but I do offer a live in Adobe Connect course orientation for students. And during that first week of the session, I offer 5 different options. And I know that seems like a lot, but it gives me a chance to speak to every student individually in that session, to connect with them all. I do require that students choose one of the 5 where we walk through course requirements and we visit the syllabus, and they can hear me, see me. I'll keep the camera and the audio on in Adobe Connect, and we can begin to establish those first impression connections that way, as opposed to a recording that you might want to do. Again, it's all about your preference and your teaching style. So the students connecting, the other thing that I've taken to doing for some time now is separating students into small groups for their conversations and dialogue, whatever that happens to be. Whatever you choose to be your classroom substitute. If that's a threaded discussion, if that's in the form of blogs in Blackboard, the campus pack building blocks were updated in August and they are working very well. So whichever one of those methods you choose to support asynchronous conversation with your students and among your students, I prefer to put those in small groups because I think the dialogue is much more authentic than I'm writing to everyone and everyone is writing to me. It can be really overwhelming for students. So small groups tends to work a little bit better, at least for me. Making your course say you is the part that you really have to think through. Again, which one of these things makes the most sense for you? Do you want to share a picture of yourself or not? Do you want to say what your personal interests are? How do you want to be present? Some people still have a thing about having their picture displayed, and they want something else to represent them in the course. And by the way, I have the webcam off this morning, not because I have a thing about that, but because Sometimes I have some issues with keeping the Adobe Connect room alive and well during a session where there are a lot of participants if I keep the webcam on. So it's off today just to make sure that the performance of the room works well. And Gina, I see your question. I'm going to finish this last engage one and then we'll stop for questions for a sec. The engage part being a part of the class and being a part of the class regularly. Occasionally I will share a new piece of literature or I'll invite students. I invited students to the session today. I haven't had a chance to look and see if any of my students are actually in the session, but I did share the link with them because they were good enough to share their input with me yesterday, and I'm going to show that to you in a few minutes. But different ways to connect with them over the course of your session. And creating opportunities to interact that are not just text-based, taking advantage of these fantastic technological affordances that are at our disposal, like Adobe Connect and like the video everywhere in Blackboard, or other ways that many of you are familiar with the tool Jing, and you might use Jing to do quick words to your class or demonstrations of things. You might just record audio into feedback that you have the option to do now with the inline grading. So all of those are opportunities to engage and take advantage of the media features that you have at your disposal, not just typing a text response. That would be the thing that we most typically use in an online course. So let's see. Let me stop for a sec and see what your questions are. And I'm going to take Gina's question. How do you decide when to schedule live sessions such as a course intro and office hour? That is a really great question. And that's kind of a roll of the dice. I try to do them at different times of the day, different days of the week. One piece of feedback from my class, I did not do an evening session this semester. I usually do. I do morning, mid-afternoon, late afternoon, one evening, and one weekend, because like a Saturday, because the students are often, like I learned in my recent experience as an online learner, that I would do my work in fits of really intense engagement on weekends. And so I try to offer that weekend option for students. And it really is kind of a toss-up. But I try to get to all of them over the course of the week by varying the time interval. But my class is going to say to you in their feedback that they would have liked to have had the opportunity to have an evening option because of their schedules. And I don't really publicize it widely, but I do record for any of them who absolutely positively cannot get into a live session, because there's nothing worse for your online learner than to get into an online course and to get that, oh, by the way, gotcha, that there's a thing that you have to do where you have to come to campus or you have to log in at a particular time. It's kind of not what most online learners are expecting. So let's see. Cedric says he has to leave early. One of the best conference helpful information for instructors currently teaching online and planning. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate that feedback. And Cedric, maybe you can catch the rest at the end of the session in the recording. Thank you for being here. I appreciate the feedback. Any other questions? I'm going to plunge on ahead, watching the clock. So we're going to end with, again, some big themes: being available, being human, and being intentional about your design. So in being available, some of this we've touched on already. Deciding for yourself beforehand where and when and how you're going to make yourself available to your students. Office hours, timely feedback, varied feedback, leaving those traces behind that you've actually been present, that your students can see. And this, I'll tell a story. And to those of you who may be students who may be logged into the session, I'm not sure. If you are my students, this is kind of on your behalf. The leaving traces behind, I'm very, very behind in terms of keeping up with their postings this semester, and I have not given feedback in as timely a manner as I would prefer, as I typically do, because I had a travel week in the middle of, like, right after our session started. So I've been trying to climb the hill of giving feedback um, ever since we started in the middle of October, and I haven't quite caught them. And it is troubling when the feedback doesn't come in a timely manner, to get that feedback in time to inform a next submission or things like that. But still, I've tried to be very present in other ways, and I think that's come through to my class. I hope they've gotten that message. Live sessions offering that opportunity, creating your instructional presence. Now, the whole idea about direct instruction versus not is a question that I did want to spend a little bit of time on. Very often, the assumption and the preferred manner of designing an online course, and the first question that I get often asked by faculty who are going to take their face-to-face class to an online environment for the first time, it is, how can I record narrated PowerPoints? That's the first thing that I want to know. How can I basically deliver a lecture in my online course? So, okay, maybe that's precisely what you need to do, and maybe that is a good strategy for you, but I want to challenge you to think beyond that. I do not lecture ever at all. There's no narrated anything of mine in my course. And I asked my class yesterday, my face-to-face class, I have a face-to-face section of the same course I'm teaching online, and I said to them, how do you feel about that? How would you feel about not ever having me tell you what you should be learning? And they were like, oh, wow, well, we like this a whole lot better. We like not having lectures. We like having discussions if we were in your online class. And my online students said basically the same thing. So my course is designed, and I'll be the first to admit that my content lends itself to and allows me to have very rich media and information that I present and share with my students, so that doesn't really require that I tell it to them in the form of lectures. But this is another one of those, what is your teaching style? How do you prefer to be present, and how do you prefer to bring students into that community and relationship with the ideas that you want them to learn? And so how you create your own instructional presence, if that's in the form of things that you make yourself or things that you curate and share, are really decisions that you need to make in the whole, how I'm going to design my online course. Troubleshooting and being present for troubleshooting is a little thing that we'd like to ignore and say, okay, call the help desk. But here's a quick example. So I've said to you that I make myself available a lot, and I'm often online working and reading student work in the evening. So evening before last, I had an ongoing dialogue with a student who was having an issue with a particular space that she was working in Blackboard, and we probably exchanged a good dozen messages back and forth during the course of the evening to try to solve her problem. So it's a given that something that you set up is not going to go exactly as you expect during the course of the course, and you're going to need to troubleshoot. But one thing that I work really hard at trying to help my students go away from me with, sure, I plan for troubleshooting, and I can probably do a little bit more of my own troubleshooting than maybe the average person can, because I'm a little bit more intimately acquainted with some of the tools than the average faculty member might even want to be. And there are resources that faculty can appeal to for troubleshooting. But the LMGTFY, anybody know what that is? Let me Google that for you. So one of the things that I point students to is that the whole ask three, then me, give help, get help, become a self-supporting community before you panic and call the help desk or email me. Or what did you do to try to troubleshoot yourself? What steps did you go through? Did you go to Blackboard Help? Have you noticed that at the bottom of the navigational menu in your course is Blackboard Help that you can click in and you can search? And sometimes you can solve your own problem without. And the course, I'll admit that the course I teach is it's a digital and information literacy course, so that it fits the theme of my course. Maybe learning to troubleshoot your own technology is not an important focus for your students, but it is something that it's worth saying something about, that you will need to think about how you're going to do that. And showing and telling, like helping with the technology and demonstrating videos and detailed instructions. So I had a dialogue with a colleague a little bit earlier this week, and it was basically her objecting to the need to show students how to use some of the technology that they were using in her course. So I'll toss that out to you. What do you think about that? Should your course be able to basically run without your intervention once you set it up? Should you never have to say, well, okay, here, if you're having trouble with that discussion forum, and if you've been using Campus Pack and looked in there, it is a little bit different from what it was last year or last semester. How do you deal with that, and planning for that ahead of time? So before I continue, let me stop. Winona, yay, hey there, how are you? We can have a private conversation later. Thank you for being here. I'm not sure how you found the link, but welcome. It's fantastic to see you in the room. And so, can you talk about how you have guest speakers in the class? So I do guest speakers in a variety of ways. I might bring a guest in the form of a recorded session. And so I would invite, and I've done a little bit of that lately, where I've had professional experts in the field, like I'll invite them into Adobe Connect and we'll do an interview thing. And I'll ask them some questions and they respond, and so that recording is made available. But Adobe Connect is another really great tool if you can make a live interaction with a guest available through Adobe Connect. There's some free tools that if you can't use Adobe Connect, or you aren't comfortable with it, or you want some other options, there's a tool called Big Blue Button that basically does these same things, that you can set up a room. And there's also a tool called Join Me. I'm not sure that Join Me is entirely free, but it's another way to bring others into a session and invite them to participate and save a record of that. Let's see, best practice for announcing you will mandate synchronous sessions will be put, of course. Yes, great point, Veronica. And we do require that here, that if faculty are going to bring students to campus, say for testing, that has to be indicated in the registration information. That's an excellent point, so that students know that up front, that they know to expect that there are certain times when there are sessions on campus that they actually have to physically come for. And then if that doesn't suit them, if that's not possible, they're in another state, then they can choose another online section that doesn't require that. Yes, and I appreciate that comment. If an online course should be able to run itself, but it doesn't excuse oneself and allow being absent. And I think I've gotten to the point over semester after semester that it's my preference, again, this is my preference, and I'm telling you a lot of what's my practice that's been informed by my experience with students. It's my preference that I create points where I deliberately have to be there and show and tell, not necessarily have students be able to do everything that they need without ever interacting with me. And Winona, thanks. There should be short videos and demonstrating how to use tools. Many of these could be links from the company. Yes, you might show students how to use something or how to accomplish something, or link to other resources that would help them. Good point. I know we're running out of time. Being intentional about conversations. One thing that I do want to say about conversations, and my preference about these and being present in these, is maybe a little bit different. And I know that some of my colleagues disagree about this, but when I've set up the informal dialogue space that is basically my classroom substitute, I do not require formal writing or formal citations in those. And here's why. When I ask students and they respond to writing prompts in my course, we've all read the same material, we've all engaged with the same ideas in that learning module, and so I don't personally feel it's necessary for them to cite chapter and verse of that, assuming that they can indicate in what they write how their writing is informed by what they studied and read. And some of that takes a little time for them to get to, but and they express that it's very liberating not to be required to write, because we don't do that when we're talking in a classroom. When we have a dialogue in a classroom, we're not saying, oh, wait a second, let me give you the year and the page number and the paper that came from. And so let me encourage you to think about that. Many of these items we've looked at before, those regular touch points, contact information, your availability, etc. I'm going to skip on past this because I do want you to see the feedback from my students in the few minutes that we have remaining. So I invited them to just say, I used a tool called Padlet for this and dropped it into our Blackboard section, and they were able to take like 2 minutes to give you this information and these suggestions from our course. And these are some things that students I have in my course right now had to say. And I'm going to stick this link in. It's linked from the presentation, but I'll also give you this link in the chat in case you want to look at the Padlet later. So some of these were really awesome. Communication, they've noted that is important, and some of them noted that they were frustrated with having the course hidden until the first day of class. Some of them noted that it was frustrating to them to have assignments that had old dates on them that had been copied. I did not pay them for the instructor for Nursing 427. That's our course. Should be a role model. I did not pay them for those comments. I can assure you that those were not solicited. In fact, I asked them not to name names for things that were good or not so good. But you can see some of what they had to say. Give an example of assignments, a model post, a model paper, a model project, emails with deadlines, the weekly office hour they've responded to. So some of what I've mentioned as examples of ways that you can be present and connect, they've actually noted, and they've noted the importance without prompting from me. So I know that I am a couple of minutes over time, and Veronica, totally apologize for that. I want to thank you all again for being here and for your attention and your participation. I really appreciate the opportunity. I wish you the very best with finding your sweet spot in your online course and instruction. Feel free to contact me. I'm going to invite you to connect on Twitter. If you're a Twitter user, my Twitter handle is there. And I appreciate the opportunity again. Pull down the handout and get the link to the presentation for follow-up if you'd like. Thanks so much, everyone.